And we are back on the Build Phase podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Ben. And on today's episode, I'm going to talk about Krakoa. But before I get into that, I want to touch on housekeeping, I guess. I am not going to get into any of the details about any of this stuff here or probably ever again on the podcast. But for those of you who are plugged into the Versus community, there was a post made yesterday. The nature of the post was an apology. I just want to throw it out here as well as I did on Facebook. Listeners of the show are probably aware, but if you're not aware, I am one of the mods, part of the mod team for the Facebook Collective. And there's some membership issues that may need to be confronted, and I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any thoughts on this, if you don't know what I'm talking about, fine, don't worry about it. But if you have any thoughts on this, I'd really like to see it either by posting on the thread on the Facebook Collective or messaging me or even one of the other mod team members privately. What the community thinks on this topic is really, really important to me. We want to get this right as a mod team. We want to do the correct thing. So I'm going to leave it at that. I don't want to get into any other details about that topic because today I want to talk about Krakoa. Now, what is Krakoa? So Krakoa, and the heroes of Krakoa, are going to be featured in the next 200 card giant-sized box. Interestingly, if I look at the Game Nerds pre-order for this Versus expansion, now this was expected to be released on July 6th. Obviously, we've had some distribution issues, but I want to talk about the kind of rumors here. Regardless, I don't know when we're going to get this box. Clearly not on time, but that's neither here nor there for the purposes of this show. This is listed in the description on the vendor's website as the 200 card giant-sized starter. Starter? Have we heard the term starter before? Now, I don't know if this is just a Game Nerds thing, that this is whoever wrote this copy for the website wrote it that way, or if these summer expansions are now going to be considered starter sets. You know, we got a lot of ink spilled over how the Civil War box and the Civil War arc as a whole was intended to be a starting point for new players. Now, the use of the word starter here on this giant size indicates to me, and additionally, this is a set that's, well, at least was scheduled to come out with the same kind of release cadence as the big 200 card summer box, like Fantastic Battles, which didn't totally work as an entry point for new players, but was a great set nonetheless. And then last year's Civil War Battles. It seems like this set's going to live in that same temporal space with regard to the release schedule, or was intended to at least. And so I don't know, maybe I'm making too much hay out of the use of this word starter here, but I think that could be instructive as to future plans. And if that is the plan, like, let's say I'm right, and the intent from the designers is to always have the 200 card summer box, like the hot new arc during convention season, is a good jumping on point for new players. Yes, that's good. That is awesome. That is definitely planning ahead in a durable, I think, important kind of way. So great if that ends up being true. So to continue reading this, introducing the newest 200 card giant size starter, House of X is the first issue of the 3-part Heroes of Krakoa storyline. Professor Charles Xavier reveals his master plan to build a nation for mutants on the living island of Krakoa beyond the reach of any human leaders who would dare threaten mutant kind. The Heroes of Krakoa story arc content highlights. Expand your mutant army with characters from across the history of Marvel Comics. Each expansion adds to both X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants teams. Play as 26 main characters, including new versions of returning favorites and others appearing for the first time. Really want to talk about that. Customize your team with powerful heroes from the mutant nation of Krakoa. Epic competitive gameplay pits your team of mutants against your opponents. Okay, so we'll get 200 cards, rule sheet, token sheet. Gotcha. So to circle back to this, new versions of favorites and others appearing for the first time. Obviously, Wolverine. Professor X feels like an absolute must. If we're adding to the Brotherhood of Mutants, and particularly focusing on mutants in this way, I think Magneto is a must. So these are all characters that we've seen before that I think we're likely to see again in this storyline. Now, I want to lay out my bias cards here. I am not a big X-Men fan. I'm not a hater. I don't dislike the X-Men, but as far as my comic reading, while I do have some really fond memories of like the Executioner song storyline from like 1991 or 92, not considered to be like one of the greatest X-Men stories by any stretch of the imagination, but very important to me as a like 11 or 12-year old when I read that for the first time. I thought it was amazing. So I do have fond memories of reading X-Men comics. My brother's favorite superhero is Wolverine, so there was never a shortage of X-Men comics around. But probably the most time I spent with the X-Men was da-na-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, you're younger than me, probably. So I really liked that 90s X-Men cartoon. And those depictions of the characters are kind of what I have in my head. You know, when people talk about like, oh, uh, my ship captain is Picard or whatever. My version of the X-Men that I have in my head is like the platonic forms of these characters are all filtered through that early 90s blue and yellow, or I guess blue and gold era of X-Men comics. But again, I'm not the biggest fan. So, as a casual, I come to the idea of which X-Men characters will be appearing for the first time, and I still have the right answer. Even lacking expertise in this area, I promise I have the right answer because the right answer is Nightcrawler. Where, where, where is Nightcrawler? It is absurd that we're this many years into the Versus game and we haven't seen a Nightcrawler card, and this is an X-Men box. Now, as someone who's not the biggest fan of X-Men, seeing another expansion to the X-Men team, I'm kind of ambivalent about it. I get that there's X-Men that we haven't seen cards of before, clearly, and we're going to get some of them. If Nightcrawler is not one of them, this is all an exercise in distraction. And I will be so frustrated because we got to get Nightcrawler. Now, as far as other X-Men that should be featured that we haven't seen in the game yet, do we have a Jubilee? Let me see here. I'm trying to think of X-Men characters that we don't already have cards for. And pretty much everybody who comes to mind, like Psylocke, Rogue is my favorite X-Men. You know, most of these characters we have pretty good versions of. Gambit. Okay, so we don't have a Jubilee card, which I didn't think. So that's one X-Men that I can name. We even have a Lockheed card, the little dragon. Like, that's barely even a character, and we have a card for that thing. So we've got a lot of X-Men cards. But really, all of my speculation, all of my interest in others appearing for the first time, all the weight in that sentence to me either needs to ultimately spell Nightcrawler or I'm going to be super bummed out. Now, with regard to Krakoa as a storyline, so my understanding of Krakoa is that he is, I think it's a he. Oh, I don't want to misgender this island. Let me look that up too. Krakoa, the island that walks like a man. So I don't know if it is a he. We'll say they from here on out, but it apparently walks like a man. And this hangs out in the Pacific Ocean. It's spawned from a nuclear testing area. None of this stuff. I didn't know any of this. I didn't realize. So it does seem like a little bit of a weird place to want to move all the mutants, in my opinion. But I suppose Professor X probably has his reasons why Krakoa would be safer for the mutants than, say, North America. And honestly, that's kind of a sad commentary on human society, isn't it? That the mutants would be safer living on a living island that's at least close enough to nuclear radiation that that it had something to do with this guy's origin story. So that I hope. So here's some more speculation. I hope we see some kind of Krakoa interaction with the location, with the resource row. So a living island that we could say recruit out of the resource row, kind of like the way Death Trap works for the prey team, or the way the recruit. No, that's wrong. What was it? Maybe it was recruit mechanic in old versus. I can't remember now. Doesn't matter. That would be cool, and that would kind of symbolize this creature being sentient and being able to move around and do stuff, but coming from where we normally keep our locations. That would be kind of cool. I'd like to see maybe actual blue and yellow Wolverine that does snickety snickety stuff in an aggressive fashion, like a Wolverine that plays kind of like the Utopia Rogue does, like a hyper aggressive one. I'd for sure like to see a better version of Cyclops. I don't think we've really gotten a good version of that character yet. Not terrible versions, but not something that's hanging out in the top tier where people have to actually think about it. Cyclops has always, all the versions we've gotten have been kind of niche characters. So I think there's probably some gaps within the X-Men storyline that still need filled. And as much as in my kind of ambivalence towards X-Men as a corner of the Marvel Universe, can't sit here and name off like the 10 cards I most want to see. For the people who are fans of X-Men, yeah, let's give them more X-Men. I'm totally with that. You know, the team I'd really like to see, and I've been asking for, oh, look at this. So I click on Giant Size X-Men #1, and in the third paragraph, Nightcrawler is mentioned. So the Wikipedia article for Krakoa and this Giant Size X-Men #1, third paragraph, Nightcrawler is mentioned. Just had to say that twice to make sure for those in the back. Uh, when are we going to see this set? So here's what I don't want to have happen. And I saw Bert talking about this earlier today. I don't want to be in a situation where we get 9 sets coming out all at once, or 6 sets coming out, like 2 full arcs coming out on the same day. While I personally would be okay with that because I'd be able to go get those 9 sets, I'd be able to start tearing into them and testing with them. I know that that is not necessarily going to be true for all consumers. So if a whole bunch of sets come out right on top of each other, it's going to hurt the overall sales of each individual set. And I want to see Versus do well. So whatever the plan is, whatever the release schedule is ultimately going to be, both for the MCU arc and for this new Krakoa arc, I hope Upper Deck figures out a way to kind of pace it out. And because I would really hate for these to all come out and then they don't sell as well because 6 sets on one day, some percentage of people who would have otherwise bought them have to put that purchase off for a while. And then by the time they buy it, it's not the hot new thing. I would hate for that kind of scenario to unfold and then have somebody at Upper Deck go, oh, it looks like Versus sales numbers are slipping. No, man, no. Hopefully certainly there are people who have deep enough analysis of how their products are performing and selling that this is probably me tilting at windmills here. But overall, my goal is to always see the game moving in a positive direction. And while I would be excited to get hundreds of new cards all on one day, I think that would not be the best for the overall health of the game and the overall longevity of the sales numbers of those sets. So I'll leave that there. I'm excited about this stuff. That's the thing that's so weird. I spent so many years kind of complaining about Upper Deck's inability to hit release dates. And it was when they were missing release dates by a week or a month or a relatively small period of time. And now here we are with this incredibly large drought. And honestly, I carry water for him on it. I have a lot of forgiveness and compassion for the situation that we're in globally. And I know I've said this before and it's probably getting a little tedious, but I think they've done a pretty decent job thus far navigating what is, I'm sure, some of the most challenging shipping and distribution issues that have ever existed for probably everyone in the company. So I don't have a lot of criticism. My excitement is my excitement. I really wish they would give us more spoilers. Like, I kind of get the idea that spoilers are meant to build up excitement right before the release of an item. But if we don't have anything else to talk about, if the items aren't coming, we aren't going to get the cards, at least give us the spoilers, man. Like, let us talk about these cards that are eventually going to come out. And yeah, it might not build up as much excitement as it would in an ideal situation. The spoiler articles, I agree, act as kind of a ramp that build up until the exact moment of the set's release, and then everybody gets it when they're at maximum hype. We can't necessarily do that. And I assure everyone, having little tiny ramps of hype that maybe tail off before the set's actually released, but having multiple bumps of hype as different cards are revealed, probably, at least for me, would keep me more excited about the game, and there'd be more to talk about the game. So I hope they start giving us more information. Ideally, I'd like to see more new cards, even if it's cards that aren't going to be released for months. Let me at least look at them and start thinking about them. And I think that will help build more excitement for the game moving forward. Okay, so overall, my kind of final summary of Krakoa, it's probably not a set that's like exactly for me, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. The only problem I'm going to have with Krakoa is if somewhere in this arc, in these, what is it, 310 cards? Yeah, a 200 card box and 255s. Yeah, there's 310 cards. If there is not a Nightcrawler card, we're going to have problems. Go win some games.